This is the Succeed in Business podcast. The podcast is inspired by a book titled Succeed in Business, Learn from Your Business Failures and Succeed. The book shares practical information on how to find inspiration in humble beginnings to become a successful entrepreneur. Through this book, you will learn that starting small is always the best way, and if you fail, you are equipped enough to start again. It also provides nuggets at the end that you need to read daily to know how to navigate challenges in your small business. If you want to get a copy of the book, contact Mpho Nenweli at 082-567-3099 on WhatsApp and on email mpho@anisa.co.za. The book costs 259 rands including courier.
Hello everyone, this is Mpho Nenweli and this is the Succeed in Business podcast. This podcast will bring the best in you. Failure is inspiration. Success is within your reach. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about my humble village beginnings and how my interest in business started. I just want to talk to those people who may be wondering, where is their business interest coming from? And why do they have the entrepreneurship bug? I will just use my story also to show my journey in business, to show how I started and what inspired me. I will be sharing more details on the types of businesses that I started, the failures that I encountered, and the limited successes that I've had, just to make sure that wherever you are, you can feel inspired to start a small business. And you must also feel that it's always the right thing to start small. There's always room to grow. The only way, if you're starting at the bottom with a zero in your business account, the only way you can go is up. That simply means you can be able to grow your business from zero to something very important. I will not go into in depth in this particular episode, but I'll just share how I grew up and how entrepreneurship got into me, inspired by the people around me from the village and the small town near the small town where I come from. I would like to share more about my village beginnings and my, some important manifestations of things that happened when I was very young that I didn't understand, that came to be, very prophetic in the manner in which my life turned out to be in the journey of entrepreneurship and life in broad. I was born in Johannesburg in a hospital called Natalspruit. I don't really have any memories of being in Johannesburg. I grew up in a village called Mangondi village near a small town called Thando in the far north part of South Africa, in the province of Limpopo, just bordering Zimbabwe. The village where I am, it's not far away, 30-40 kilometers away from the Punda Maria Gate and the Pafuri Gate of the Kruger National Park, bordering Mozambique, and also bordering Zimbabwe, the Gonarezu National Park of Zimbabwe. Venda was, or the Thando where I come from, was part of the former Venda homeland, predominantly composed of the Venda speaking people or the Venda tribe. And it was a homeland under apartheid. So I grew up in that part of the world, and I've got very nice memories of being in that particular part. This included looking after goats, and this has led me now to start seriously venturing into farming. It was because the experience I've had looking after goats in the rural areas. So that experience has now brought a very interesting edge to see agriculture as a viable business opportunity, and one that I'm very regretful that I should have noted long ago. However, there was one prophet who once told me at around 2010, 2011, somewhere there, that I was going to go into farming. And by then I was doing environmental consulting. And I felt like the prophet was insulting me, and it was a low-level thing. And because I was an environmentalist and used to working in offices, I never saw agriculture as something that is worth doing. But now I've realized agriculture really is the best thing to do. That's where is the only business where you see your money growing in front of your eyes, when the animals multiply if they are looked after properly. When I grew up, we used to make cars using wires. It was very interesting to note that I grew up to be able to own just a few cars. You know, these are things that when you're doing them at a younger age, you never think you'll grow older and own a car. So they manifest themselves at an older age. I remember also doing an aeroplane using wires. It never really flew, and it was also based on just seeing aeroplanes up in the sky at the village where I was staying. But I was amazed to realize that later on in my life, when I started to work, I got to fly a lot to many countries: the United States, Italy, the UK, Senegal, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, many countries that I've been able to visit, Mexico. So these things that happen sometimes when we are young, they are there to guide us when we grow older. So always look for these basic things. Take time to introspect. Even on the issue of business, you will find that you always had some form of interest. It might be something very small. Maybe you were selling treats at school. Maybe you always wanted to go and volunteer to work at somebody's small business. There's always something that inspires you. I'll talk a little bit more on the inspiration I've had when I was assisting my mom at a small town where she used to sell in Pando. So this is basically the village beginnings where I come from. When I was growing up, one of the things that I did was to make a gun using wires also. And I didn't really know why I was doing that. And fortunately, the gun didn't really work out and it didn't become a real gun. But I realized when I started to work that the first job that I had to do was actually working just for a few months, I think less than 6 months, as a police person in a police station called Brixton in Johannesburg. Boysens, not Brixton, Boysens in Johannesburg. So these are the things that sometimes they happen, but they sort of, are the manifestations of how your journey will pan out. But these things, they happen when you are younger. So that's why I just want to share, to just show people that there's always a connection of sometimes of the memories of when you grow up, what some particular things that happen that look weird, but they tend to be the ones that guide your journey throughout your life. So obviously in the village, life was good. One walked barefoot, connected to the earth. We'll wake up to the sound of the birds and the chicken. We'll go to the forest. The village was really, in those days, we're having very few households when I grew up, around between 73 when I was born and when I matriculated in 1991, then 92, 93, 4, 5, when I was still there in the village. It was still quite very green. So I could go to the forest, very safe, eat wild fruits, sleep under a tree, could go also to the Ruvu River, which was very close there in the southern part of the village. We will do the swimming, and we will, some of the people will do the fishing. So it was quite very nice. And in the night, one of the nice things was to just look at the stars and the moon. Very, one will connect very nicely to the to the environment when I was still in the village. I would like also to share a little bit about my village family, and also to share context that I'm talking about pre-1994, which is basically mainly the apartheid times in South Africa, where there was a government that didn't give opportunities to black people. And I come from a very poor family, and that was very common in those days. Poor in the sense that we didn't really have much money, but we did have access to land. And then where we stayed, our parents had a big piece of land, not too big, but we could plow some maize and some vegetables that we'll eat. And up until today, my mom still plows maize, beans sometimes, and some vegetables that she uses. And by saying I'm poor, I'm not trying to, to talk bad about my parents. I am because of my parents and my village. I'm not better than my roots in any way. I still feel very much connected and inspired by the little things that my parents did. For example, what my mom will do, create a meal out of very minimal resources, but still the meal will be nice and tasty without, being diverse in any way. No spices, sometimes not even any fish oils. We use natural oil that will be drained from the chicken or from the beef that she will be cooking. So it was quite very simple. I'm very proud of my village and rural beginnings, and I love and I still miss the serenity of the village that I grew up in before the electricity came in, because now there's quite a lot of noise. The green scenery, which is quite very healing. I start to realize that it was very good to my health when I'm here in the urban area, where it's just bumper to bumper and all I'm seeing is concrete and interacting with people who seem to be quite very angry. And I guess it's basically because of the capitalist system, which squeezes people so badly. So the humility of the people, the simplicity of the people, the pure human beings that I interacted with in the village, when I was growing up, and by the simple human beings, I mean, if you go there now, you buy a 2 liter of Coke and a loaf of bread, sit under a tree, you can have a beautiful chat. People will not feel like they are missing anything. You can have a relationship with someone and then enjoy the simplicity, the simple things in life, and still feel very good. And the good organic food, obviously, that we had access to, that I realized it was something that we took for granted. When you come in the urban areas, you are starting to be sold something that you had easily accessible in the villages. The sense of community, people will help each other. If there's a funeral, people will come. The digging of the grave, it is done by the local people for free, without looking for any money. And this, unfortunately, as much as the urban area provides much opportunities in terms of the scale of the population and the economy that is here, where I'm based in South Africa, in Pretoria, which is Gauteng. But somehow I do also feel sick and in sometimes depressed, because sometimes you feel like the allure for the false success that brought you here can sometimes get into you, although there's still a lot of opportunities here than you will find in the rural areas. The challenge is only that here in the urban areas, sometimes we tend to work too hard, sleepless, and then depression also gets into the space, because also in South Africa, sadly, we are dealing with a deeply entrenched and greedy capitalist system that makes it very difficult for any black person to start a business. There's hardly any industry that is not occupied by monopoly, capital, or the big companies that are owned by some particular races that do not want other people to get into the space. So the South African economy is very racist, it's divided, and it's very difficult for a black person to crack. But still, my story in this episode is not to make people to give up, but to say we still have to get into the space and grab a piece of the pie. Nobody's going to offer it to us, and if we are offered, there is not much that you can benefit from something that somebody offers to you, because there's always strings attached. You have to dance to the tune of the person who offers you something. So let's create our own businesses, let's create our own industries, our own insurances, our own manufacturing, our own schools, our own universities. Let's pull together the resources. This is the message that I'm trying to give here, to say you can start small. I'm giving a picture of the background I grew up in, the poverty, but at the same time I'm telling you this is not limiting. You can always succeed, and then take advantage of whatever little potential you have. It can be the skill you have, the money you have, the support that you have from your parents, the support that you have from your siblings. Take advantage of that whilst it still exists, and make the best out of it. On the issue of family, my father was illiterate, and unfortunately he was he drank literally all the time that I knew. I think when I was born he was already drinking, and then he drank literally up until he retired. And the doctors told him when he was a bit sickly after retiring that he was not going to live long if he continued to drink and smoke. And that's when he stopped. And then I think the last 3 or so years he was quite very nice and peaceful person. It's just that I was already working by the time, so I didn't have enough time to interact a lot with him. But I did my best to spoil him as much as possible together with my mother. That was the first mission I had when I first got the first job, was to ensure that they were comfortable. They had their shelter, they had the food. And then I also felt it was a blessing to have both of them when I started working, because I saw some other people who started working and they never had a single parent to impress or to show some love to. So my dad, became somebody very nice at that particular last part of his life. So, but when I was growing up in those days, there was no issue of birthdays. I don't remember my parents buying me a cake or anything, but still, it's not something that I really miss. I'm not interested in having a birthday party or anything. Actually, I'm such a private person. I don't like hanging around a lot of people. And the issue of my dad probably drinking, sometimes not really being warm, which probably affects my personality in some way, is I don't really blame him completely. I look at him in a particular context, that he grew up in a particular era, and his peers didn't behave better, and there's a likelihood that his father, who is my grandfather, probably didn't also show him much warmth or how to be a different father. So I think that's a thing that I wanted to indicate in giving my background, to say don't just judge your parents, look at them in a particular context. What time did they grow in, and then when did they grow? Where they abused themselves? Where did they get any parental love and care and warmth? If not, then you must know that they will struggle to give what they don't know or what they don't have themselves. But one thing that I admire about my father is that despite the fact that he drank most of his life, he highly respected his job. He worked as a laborer at the Department of Water Affairs by then, digging trenches where they were putting pipelines for households in the villages. He will never be late for work, no matter even if he slept drunk. Actually, he will wake up earlier, sometimes at 1 or 2 in the night, and my mom will have to fight with him to say no, but the bus is not going to pass now, and then he will be taking his bag, wanting to leave for work. He never got late for work. That's something that I learned from him, and I still practice to this day, which is very important also in business. You cannot be late for meetings. It creates a very bad impression, and you will lose deals, and people will not take you serious. So that's something that I learned. He also never took leave or sick leave they will have to tell him, no, we think you're not looking okay, please go home. Even by the time you are supposed to be on annual leave, the supervisor will have to come and tell you, no, you have to take leave and go home and rest. So that appreciation of work, the opportunity to be given the ability to work, it's something that he really took with both hands, and it's something that I learned from my father. And when I come to my mother's side, my mother is semi-literate. She's still alive, around 81 years old, but very street smart, and she can navigate quite a lot of things in life. And she sees a lot of possibilities, especially in business. She will always tell me that money is something so stupid. You can catch it in many ways. You just have to devise a small plan, and you will be able to have it if you get focused and you have a plan. And it's something that I still apply up until this day. She's my mom. I feel like she's very highly talented educationally, but she's a victim of the era. When she grew up, they didn't see it necessary to send girls to school, and then her parents felt that if she could get educated, she would not get married, and then she will also not, it may affect her mentally. So there were these, superstitious beliefs that education was not very good in those days. Although there were schools, but one had to walk to the schools, and there were few. So she could have been something very different than what she is at the moment. But, she's quite a very intelligent person. And then I still have a lot of intelligent conversations with her, with my mom. If I go home to the village, we normally sleep late in the middle of the night, having a chat on a lot of things. And even when we have a call, it doesn't last less than an hour, where we chat about this and that, including life. So I've got a lot of respect, and I admire, the tenacity, the business acumen, of how to start and be self-reliant from my mother. And I think it's something that she has instilled in me. And she's somebody who admires the significance of education, and she really pushed me to be where I am as I speak today. The other thing also, maybe to share a light, I went to a school, the primary schooling was called Mangoli. I went to a primary school called Mangoli Primary School, which was just a few meters away from our home, less than 10 meters away. So I was very lucky that my parents just built just next to the school. And I could just walk to the school, and even if I didn't have money to buy anything at school, I would just go home and eat the leftovers and still go back to school. So it was very ordinary school, no facilities for anything, no library. I never saw a book when I was there, or in the library context, or a newspaper or a magazine. There was no such until I finished the whole time at the primary school. No sports facilities, no musical instruments, no laboratory, no swimming pool, no tennis court, no whatever. So it was just bare and just nothing. And I'm sad to say, even now in South Africa, 30 years after democracy, none of the things that I'm talking about exist in the school. Not even internet, free internet for the kids. Not even a computer lab, so not even a library. So it has not really improved. People are still dealing with the bare minimum, and putting them at a very serious disadvantage, especially in the rural areas where the school now education, it requires a lot of research on the internet, which they can't access both at home and at school, limiting the opportunity to learn for the children at the primary school where I studied, Mangoli Primary School. After finishing the primary school, I went to Gole Secondary School, and I was just there for grade 8 and 9, and then I had to leave to Chilala Secondary School. Gole was also quite very close from my home, less than I could say probably less than 2 kilometers away from the home. Could take me a 20 minutes walk to the school. So it was quite very nice to be studying very close. It was a new school. Very interesting, humorous incident when I was at college is that the principal once laughed at me when I was wearing, I think, clothes that were so different in color. And I didn't have money for the uniform. And the principal said to me, I must not dress as if I was going to hunt. And the whole class laughed. But I realized that it was because of the poverty, and I just didn't have the uniform, and I just wore whatever I had. And I didn't care about what color it was. So, that affected me a lot. I remember when I grew up, I became quite very conservative with color. I think I wore for pretty much more than 40 years of my life. It was khaki, blue, a bit of black, 3 colors basically. And I think now it's only now that what they call the midlife crisis after 50 that I start to become more colorful and wear orange and sometimes red, a little bit, but just one cloth red, one cloth orange, still fearful of color. So, but basically that's where I was in Shirara. But the good thing is that I never felt less when I was at college before I went to Shirara, because I was academically able. I was able to compete in almost every subject that I was doing. So that gave me some encouragement and some belief that I could be something in life. Shirara is a school that I did from grade 10 to grade 12. Was around 5 kilometers away, probably around 6 kilometers away from the village. Quite a bit of a walk on a tar road, and in most cases with no shoes. When I was at Shirara also, the principal was a very inspiring man called Mr. Boy, who loved English and poetry, and instilled in me the love of poetry that led me to write my first book, which was published, which is a book on poetry that has been accepted for schools in Gauteng here in South Africa for grade 12. Then the other thing also is when I was at Shirara, obviously the challenge there was I still struggled to have food during lunch at school. Uniform was still a big issue. I never had a textbook throughout all my secondary, my primary and secondary schooling, not a single textbook. The only time I saw the textbook is when the teacher had it. The secondary school had no facilities, just like the primary school. No sports facilities, no library, no lab for science, no textbooks for students. So it was quite a very hard life, and I had to pretty much write most of the syllabus on notebooks, and read from notebooks. And in those days there was no electricity, and in the night you will read using a light made of a bottle, maybe a mayonnaise bottle. You'll put in paraffin inside, and you put a bit of a cloth, and then you light it on top. The paraffin will come up, and then the light will be so small, but you will have to study throughout the night using something like that. And in most cases it will be a candle. It's either a candle or the paraffin lamp. In most cases it was just a lamp that we made by ourselves. So it was not an easy life. It was hard, but there were nice experiences. I mean, I learned with some of the best people there who are lawyers today. Some of them are accountants. So very good friends that I made when I was still, at Shirara Secondary School. The only regret I have is that pre-1994 in South Africa, the influence of politics was very much. So I feel like if it was not there, I could have been something different educationally. I decided to do history and geography because, politics was the big thing. Everybody wanted to do something to liberate the country before 1994. And then I feel I am academically more gifted in the sciences. It's easier for me if I do the sciences to get a distinction than if I'm doing history, So I feel I could have been something very different. The situation at the moment influenced me to be something. If I were to come back in another form of life, I could probably become a scientist, an engineer, or something that has to do with maths and science. Just try to give the context of sometimes the circumstances that determine or shape who we become. And it may not necessarily be the best of who we are or the capabilities that we have. So I must point out that both my schools, primary and secondary schooling, cannot be categorized as some of the good schools in any way, not by any measure. And certainly even up until today, they don't really compare with the schools that we are finding here in the urban areas, in particular for the former advantaged races in the country here in South Africa. It's said that we still have the imbalances. And these imbalances have got an effect in terms of the type of people that grow to become entrepreneurs, the level of exposure to opportunities. It's very, 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 very important. Then I managed to pass and finish my matric in 1991, and I went to do my university at the University of Venda in 1992. I did very well there when I was there. And suddenly I became sick in 1993. And I will talk a little bit about how business affects mental health and how do you juggle those things to ensure that you remain fit for purpose when you're running a small business in another episode. But here I'll just say the key lessons that I got from the sickness I got from 93, 4, 5, when I dropped out from university for 3 years, is that sickness was the gift of my life. Why? It made me to learn things that I was not taking serious, and that included the fact that God exists. I mean, I grew up in a place where my parents didn't really indoctrinate me with any form of religion, which I really appreciate up until this day. But I think just appreciating that God exists is something very important, even if one is not affiliated with any form of religion, because I believe God is above any form of religion. He's in charge of every life on earth. Doesn't matter if you're religious or not. And the other thing also is that sickness took away 3 years of my life. And that 3 years that was taken created a sense of being left behind, a vacuum in me. And that made me to have the inspiration to study non-stop, to learn non-stop, to grab every learning opportunity, make sure a year doesn't pass without me learning something. So up until today, I still read all the time. It's just with the some of the health challenges, one doesn't have really the time to have an in-depth reading like I used to, which I'm sure it would improve over time. So, and then I've also learned that the more you learn, the more you realize, the less you know. So it's a journey of continuous learning that is very enriching, both for personal growth, career growth, and also for the running or the starting of other small businesses. So it's continuous capacity building of the self. The best investment is the investment in the self. Being left behind or losing a particular portion of your life must not be used to make you feel like you must give up in life. What it must do to you is that it has created a vacuum. There's a gap that you need to patch, and that must make you to work harder, double the time that efforts in everything that you do to catch up for the lost time. Lost time is to give you the chance to apply yourself more harder. So it's not to say because you lost time you are a failure and you cannot move. That applies both in business. If you have done things that have not succeeded for a year, for 2, for 3, for 4, it doesn't mean you cannot reach your destination. It doesn't mean you cannot succeed. But what it does require is that in the coming time, you might have to double your efforts. You might have to be smarter. You might have to be more innovative. And that's what I'm trying to say to you in this particular episode. So sickness was a very big blessing for me. And obviously, this deep sense of the yearning to learn has not left me because of the loss of the 3 years. when I was sick between 1993 and 1995. And the frightening experience, though, has been that the more I learn, the more I realize, the more I need to learn. The less I know, because knowledge is as vast and as deep as the ocean. And as you learn, new knowledge is coming in literally every minute. More so with the advent of technology and the internet. The other thing also that really sickness created in me is that I think it moved me away from some of my enemies. That could be people that really didn't like me, or some spiritual challenges that I could have faced. And also, God wanted me to move out of the comfort zone, to be where I am, where I'm talking to you now. I couldn't have been what I am without having met the people that I've met, and the network that I've been exposed to, and the interesting characters of people like, for example, a man called Jack Van Zedam, who got me to travel the world, who got me to learn so many things in different parts of the world, linked me with a whole network of professors and environmentalists and business people. So God, allowed the illness to take place for me to get out of the comfort zone, and also not to settle for less. So He brought me here in Gauteng, where the opportunities are bigger. There's more to see, and then you start to realize your dreams were not really of any, were too little. I was not dreaming much. I wanted to just become maybe a teacher at home and spend my life there, and that was going to be good enough from a person who came from parents who were almost not literate, and then to becoming literate and having a degree. For me, that was going to be a very good thing for me. But the sickness brought in me that urge to study non-stop. I did my first degree at the former Black University called Vista, my second degree there. Then I went to do a Master's in Environmental Science at the University of Pretoria, and then I did a Master's in Business, and then I also went on to do a PhD on climate change. So from losing the 3 years, that brought me to study so hard, to the point that some of the people who have never lost the 3 years didn't feel the edge that I had, the edge of being left behind and wanting to have to do more and get a deep sense of fulfillment. And that is where the beauty of the sickness that I had, in hindsight, when I look, I realize I had to be sick. It was necessary. It was supposed to happen to change my life for the good. So I always say this to say, even if there's a lot of pain going around with you in the business, which is primarily my focus, down the line, take time to reflect, get away from the crowd, take walks in the, do some hiking, go camping. At that time, reflect. You will find beauty in the pain. There's always the beauty in the pain. There is beauty in the pain. You just need to identify it. We just don't see it because we concentrate on the pain and the suffering. Because the human mind grabs the pain and suffering, and it recycles it until really we run ourselves to the ground, disintegrating our own mental health. So I will talk about the connection between education and business at another episode, just to show the connection and the fact that I want to show that, especially to the youth, that the idea that you just want to run business without capacitating yourself is very disadvantageous. It limits you in terms of the business opportunities that you can do. It limits you in terms of the capability of running a complicated business without understanding the technicalities of a business. You don't know how to analyze a business statement. You don't know how to look at projections. You don't know how to develop a business strategy or a business plan. That really disadvantages you. There is a strong connection between business success and some form of education. And some of the examples that people use to say, or okay, Steve Jobs didn't have a degree, but he went on to succeed. It is sometimes having some bit of truth in it, but the sense is that the issue is that Steve Jobs did attend hieroglyphics after dropping out, which he then used to influence the design of the Mac keyboard. So, and he worked with an engineer, Steve Wozniak, who assisted in the design of the actual computer. And Steve Jobs was a real genius. So people like those who succeed with minimal education, I don't think they even make 1% of the business world. You do need some form of education. And education, I don't necessarily mean the formal education. I also mean informal education, which is learned on the job. You need that. If you're just going to run around frantically looking for growth and making a lot of money quickly without the patience, you're likely to find yourself with no form of success and getting disillusioned. Education, formal or informal, has a very strong bearing in, influencing the level of success, the level of the business that you can run, and the complexity of that particular business. Maybe also drawing on my mother's inspiration when it comes to the world of business, I would love to say that the informal business that she ran in front of a ShopRite, supermarket in the small town of Thando, assisted me to go to university. And then I saw the power of small business from her. That's why I'm not afraid to start a small business. And actually, I've got a very strong love of business, to the point that when people start to come to talk to me and talk about huge amounts of money, my ears struggle to comprehend that. I am a small business person, out and out. And then I don't shun big businesses, but I believe in organic growth, starting my account on the business from a zero and then building it up, and seeing the growth. That's what excites me. And then that's the story that I want to share. My mother showed me she can run her own business, sustain it over time by herself, send me to school, and then that's quite very important. And I just wanted to point out that the apple sometimes doesn't fall far away from the tree. I've got a very direct influence in the love of business from my mother. And despite all the education and the fact that I went to do a master's in business education, I still draw inspiration from my mother. I still know my mother's got a wealth of experience. Old people, despite their education, they have got a sense of experience. They can see if your ship is going to hit a rock, your ship is going to collapse. They know. They can tell you the path you are taking is going nowhere. So I have got due respect for informal traders like my mother. I've got due respect even for the man who sleeps under the bridge, who used to be a CEO. A man who sleeps under the bridge, who used to be employed, because I draw so much inspiration from these people that can help me to run my business better, including my own life. So the informal traders that we have in Africa and in South Africa, they've got a wealth of experience of business opportunities that we can just tap on. Some of these is just an issue of getting them together and creating a network. We can easily open banks like the ones that we have, the Grameen Bank in India, by working with these particular people. So my mother inspired me a lot in the issue of small business. She decided what to do with a small business, when to go to work, what to stock to sell, what to reduce in terms of creating sales for her clients, how to appease her clients, which clients to sell on credit to. She will decide, she never reported to anyone. She was her own boss, which I loved. And it's something that I also still appreciate up until to this day. For a person like me, who sometimes occasionally want to speak my mind, it's not very good if you are in the employment context, because people will really have, they won't like you. People don't like people who speak for themselves or who speak the truth in some cases. So business gives you that space to be yourself, to experiment, use your money. Even if you lose your money, it is your own money. You can be able to do something about your life. It gives you the leverage to innovate, and that's what I've seen with my mother. She has done the selling of treats She will change what she sells on the other time. She went and stocked clothes in Durban and sold them. She owned cattle. She owned pigs. If I want to have a piggery now, my mother can give me a lesson on piggeries. She knows that this thing can be profitable or not. If you want to be profitable, that's how you do it. She's got the practical experience that I respect more than anything else. I respect it even more than the YouTube videos that you can find online, because this is somebody I know who has practiced it, and I've seen her do it all the time. And the journey of entrepreneurship in my mother it's a lifelong journey. That's another thing that I appreciate. Entrepreneurship is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a long thing. It's a game of patience. That's what my mother has shown me. Up until today, my mother is 81 years old. She owns cattle and she still owns pigs. So she still can sell her cattle. So it's a continuous journey. It's something that you do and you continue with it for the rest of your life. It's a lifestyle. Business is a lifestyle. It's a calling. It's a contribution to humanity. It's the creation of the jobs. You are addressing poverty. You are addressing inequality. More so, God also wants people who are productive, not people who can just fast and pray for days without anything to show. You need to be able to be an entrepreneur, start a small business, create jobs, address poverty, address unemployment, address inequality. God will love you. There's no way, if there's a place called heaven, he's definitely going to send you there, just for that particular contribution. Not for you crying all the time and complaining all the time, mourning all the time, and saying, looking at the unfairness of life. Life has got so many opportunities. Even with the struggles that we have here in South Africa, there's still opportunities of starting small businesses and doing something exciting and change people's lives. And that's what people want, and government wants, and God wants. That's my belief. I think the other thing that I would want to point out is the type of homestead or home where I grew up from. My mom and dad had 3 round grass thatched mud houses. Although now I tend to call them earthen houses, because I realized the beauty of those houses and the lie that we've been told that these earthen houses are not sustainable and they are not durable. But the interesting story there that I wanted to show that is that from selling on the streets, obviously with the help of my dad, my mom managed to build us a 3 rooms for sleeping purposes, using now baked bricks or bent bricks, clay bricks with a corrugated iron. And it was a beautiful structure, and it was nice to see my mom building this structure from her small efforts as an entrepreneur. So she managed to upgrade our accommodation using the business without even having to take any form of loan. The other interesting thing that I aspire, which I loved from my mom, which I strive also not to do, is the fact that throughout all the years she operated in business, I never had her taking loans to run a business. I have never had her do things that can compromise their independence. Getting financially tied to banks. She never did that, or even loan sharks. If up until today, the age of 81, she despises loan sharks. So I really aspire the tenacity, the innovation, the foresight, and the simplicity in running a small business. And it's something that I still apply in my enterprises as I have. And I really admire the beautiful memories that my mom created in the home where we grew up, despite the challenges of poverty. She grew the chicken there. We had a small garden for the vegetables. We'll plow our maize, corn there. She will roast the maize. She will eat nice delicacies which were organic from the garden. And that's something that I just want to return to in life, which I can then still also combine with business. It's a pity it took me a whole cycle to realize that the life I lived in the village was actually the best. the illusion that I've got in the urban areas of being told you are successful when you owe a bond of a house for 20 years and a car that you pay to the bank, and then you get called every now and then for owing this and that, is not something that I like. So, and it's something bad. My mother at the age of 81 has never been as indebted as I have been in my life, but she has lived a very fulfilling life, and then up until today she's cash positive, and she has never been cash negative. It might as well be at some point in time she didn't really have money, but she was not borrowing money from people or loan sharks. So I just want to emphasize the issue of looking for business inspiration in humble beginnings. Here in Africa, I want to say most of the business opportunities are there from people selling on the street. They are there from street vendors, from informal traders. They have got the ideas, tested and tried. The informal economy is rich, and pregnant with opportunities. It's untapped. Very innovative, and resourceful people are those who are trading on the street. They've got minimum, resources, so they make sure what they have is used to the optimum. There's no wastage. So that's something that's very important. And these are the most resilient entrepreneurs in Africa. Some of them just need to be resourced with money, skills, and capacity building. The powerful women's stock fairs are also an example of something that remains untapped, which can be used to create banks and all sorts of business opportunities here in Africa. The economically marginalized people in our continent have the best tried and tested business ideas for small businesses in Africa. And there's quite an array of opportunities that entrepreneurs need to identify. And the educated entrepreneurs and the young, they need not ignore this untapped potential of business on the streets of Africa, of South Africa, in the townships and in the rural areas. There's untapped potential, unlimited. We just need to commercialize it. It can be, indigenous medication, or herbs. It can be in music. It can be in architecture. It can be in heritage. It can be in some form of engineering that our people used to do before the use of chemicals and all sorts of other stuff. So we have got an untapped ocean of opportunities in the business space here in Africa and in South Africa. And I am really confronting each and every person who's doubtful to say, you cannot doubt another day or another hour. The voice talking to you is the voice of God telling you to go start that small business, to make good for the country, our countries in Africa, and for the continent. There is no point in starting to interrogate yourself and doubting yourself and listening to the doubting Thomas and the prophets of doom who will always tell you you are going to fail. Most of the people that you are listening to have never started a business, have no experience about it, and they are not going to be able to give you any form of guidance that can make you a success. So you better take things into your own hands. Be the captain of your own, your own ship. Be the master of your own soul. So that's very important in this space of business. It's a game of confidence, and sometimes even against our relatives or our friends, we need to show them it can be done and it shall be done. Business is a possibility. We cannot stop ourselves as Africans from exploring. We cannot rely on other people offering us employment opportunities, coming here to access our resources that God has given us in abundance. So it is within us to do something. It is also within the educated masses to also realize that their education, if it's not creating any employment opportunities, any economic growth for the country, they need to ask themselves, what is it that they can do for their country here in Africa, for their countries here in Africa? What good can they do? This investment that the countries have made into their education, it's a community investment. Anybody who's been to university is funded by government in some form or another. It simply means that the ordinary man on the street has done some contribution to your education. and you need to serve in some form or another. You are indebted to some extent into doing some good to improve our situation in terms of dealing with poverty, unemployment, inequality, and an array of goods and services that we don't have here in Africa. They need us to improvise, innovate, research, and implement. We must never be paralyzed by analysis and by the prophets of doom. Business is a big opportunity that we need to grab and make sure that we control the economies of where we reside. We cannot live in the mentality where we don't produce the food we eat in the morning and during the day, lunch and supper. You don't produce the clothes you wear. You don't produce the car you drive. You don't produce literally even your own underwear. It's a disgrace. So for us Africans, I'm sending this message of inspiration to say, let's go back, let's put our efforts, let's collaborate. The whole idea of individualism is killing us. The sense that the situation that one person just wants to shine alone and let the other people languish in poverty so that they can be celebrated is harming us as Africans. We need to come together, rally together, and then be a product of excellence and accept that some amongst us will become the best. And it's normal in any society for that to happen. And we must be proud of the best amongst us, not look for ways to kill them or destroy them or form businesses that are in direct competition with them instead of coming up with other innovative ideas. Let's stop being jealous of each other, being destructive to each other. The cake of business is big. The population in Africa is growing. You will never be able to meet the needs of this particular population. So there's no need to harm each other and also kill each other for the crumbs. Let's open the space, let's grow the cake, and let's all get together and enjoy it. One more thing to add is, let's see that business is a form of prayer. And let's take a cue from God himself, in the sense that the Bible says, out of the 7 days he spent creating the earth, 6 he was working, and on the 7th he took a rest. But I think unfortunately some of us in Africa, like my physician Dr Mpho once said to me when he visited the Congo recently, he found people spending quite a significant amount of time praying. And he was perturbed. And you gave me a very interesting example that he would love if he was to be given a chance to make an experiment where he can put a garden here, which we will put fertilizer, take away the weeds. We put a garden here where we will allow the people to just pray for the crops. And we see between the one that the people are praying for the crops and the one that where we will take away the weeds, take out the weeds, and we fertilize, which one is going to grow? And I think the answer is obvious. The sad reality is that religion in Africa is going to grow exponentially because obviously it goes together with poverty, unemployment, pain and suffering, the lack of social security. People resort to prayer because they are promised there's going to be a good life somewhere else. But Africa is the Eden. Africa is the heaven. In my view, let's make the best of what we have. Let's not bank too much on the heaven we don't know where it exists. Whilst even the people who are convincing us not to do much and to work harder, they are not giving us any knowledge on business opportunities. They are having a heaven themselves here on earth, and we can see it. I'm not being negative on any establishments that we're gonna create in terms of religion, but I feel even within our churches, let's harness the networks. Let's talk business within the churches, because what this continent needs is a surge of entrepreneurship. This will also create opportunities for churches to be able to tithe, because the more the people earn well, the growth of the middle class, the millionaires, and all sorts of people, the more people can say we can get a tithe. But if you're just going to tithe people who are bankrupt, poor, from social grants, then you're not going to be able to grow your own establishments. Let's use these particular gatherings that we are having in Africa for the good. and for creating opportunities, for creating growth. Let's tap into business, be it at church, be it at any social club, be it at a soccer club. Let's always look at the business opportunity of every aspect that we're doing. If we've got small burial schemes, let's get together and see how do we grow these burial schemes to become big enterprises where we can offer burial insurances for ourselves. We need to come to the party and be like God. Work 6 days, rest on the 7th day. There's no need to pray all the time. Miles Monroe once said, God is not short of prayers. And don't pray to God as if he's deaf. Work is prayer. God himself is a worker, to the point that he says, those who do not work, they must not eat. In closing, I would want to say again, this is the Succeed in Business podcast. This podcast will bring the best in you. Failure is inspiration. Success is within your reach. And I thank you. Thank you.
If you want to get a copy of the book, contact Mpho Nenweli at 082-567-3099 on WhatsApp and on email mpho@anisa.co.za. The book costs 259 rands including courier.